is Kyle Turner. I'm chief editor of movie Mezzanine's The Balcony, and welcome to Film Critic of the Week, a weekly podcast where we pick the brains of our favorite film critics. Today, we have the superb Teo Bugbee, whose work has been featured in Grantland, The Daily Beast, The New Republic, and RogerEbert.com. She attends Wesleyan University and she's studying film. Welcome, Teo. It's great to have you.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Very happy that you're here, and I thought I'd start with the obvious question. How did you get into writing about film?
It's a funny story. I'm very lucky to have gotten in the way that I did. I didn't apply for anything. I was on Twitter, and my editor at The Daily Beast, Marlo Stern, followed me on Twitter, and he just, I guess, liked my social media presence. It was a very 21st century way in, and so he shot me an email, and I don't know, I kind of fell into it. It was very much a falling into it. I wasn't intending to write criticism, actually. And so, yeah, I've been very fortunate in every way.
That's really awesome. Did you have any passing interest in writing prior to starting at all?
I mean, I did, and I love film. I mean, I love film and I think about it a lot. It's something that, you know, kind of consumes my thoughts at all times and always has. And so in the sense that you're constantly organizing your thoughts and constantly putting ideas into formation, you know, in that sense, yeah. I don't know if I ever considered myself as a critic, or I considered the potential of writing criticism until it was kind of happening. So in that way, it's been, you know, kind of a whirlwind.
Mm-hmm. What film has had the biggest impact on you as a writer?
Ooh, as a writer? That's a good question. What would be the one? Well, when I was younger, when I was growing up, I will say that the films of Elizabeth Taylor were really important to me. In general, movies, you know, starring big personalities, especially women, were really important to me, kind of figuring out what I liked about movies and starting to think about them critically. I think a lot of people tend to have moments of awakening with directors where, you know, you sort of find your way in through how a director kind of sees the world. And that definitely happened to me, and I think it happens to anybody who loves film, but my, I think, way in was through performances.
Is there a particular performance that had the biggest impact?
Everybody loves Vivian Leigh in Gone with the Wind. Mm-hmm. So yeah, some good old Scarlett O'Hara, some good times.
Of course. Fiddle-dee-dee.
Yeah, Fiddle-dee-dee. Yeah, I know, and it's funny too because I love that movie so much, but it's the kind of movie where it's the love that dare not speak its name, you know what I mean? You don't want to condone something that you don't approve of, you know, it's a problematic film. It's older, you know, and it reflects a kind of a different worldview that isn't necessarily the one that I love, but there's so much in that film that's so important to me. Yeah, and especially that performance and that character, really.
I think this Gone with the Wind, I guess, is similar to, I might get stoned for this, The Birth of a Nation. Is it? In as much as it is, Armand White wrote something recently in that it's still worthy of having those conversations about race, having those conversations about how we have evolved.
Yeah.
In terms of how we portray things in film and in the media. And I think Gone with the Wind is as much of an important film, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, with Birth of a Nation, I was thinking about that too, you know, obviously because it's been kind of coming up. And I think in relation to there was a Boyhood piece maybe this week that was making the rounds.
I think that was clickbait.
Was it?
I feel like it was clickbait.
I didn't read it, so I don't want to, you know, besmirch anyone's intentions.
Connection.
Yeah.
It was a really, really tenuous connection, and it was only arguing that Boyhood was racist by omission, which it may or may not be, but I feel that particular line was to drive in traffic. It may be disingenuous of me to assume that.
Yeah. I don't really know. I mean, I I don't love Boyhood, but at the same time, I don't think that it is racist. I think it comes from a very specific perspective, and one that is and isn't similar to my own experiences and to anyone's who watches the movie. But yeah, that does seem like an odd connection, I will say. But with Birth of a Nation, those, I don't know. I haven't seen that one in particular. I've seen some other of D.W. Griffith's early films, both his shorts and a couple of, like Broken Blossoms and things like that. And it's difficult when you're dealing with something that has such a charged history, but you almost wonder if things would feel as still as difficult now if the medium weren't still so white, you know what I mean? Where it's like there's been so little progress in so many different ways, that there's so little to measure change by, that the things that we should feel like they're in the past don't feel like they're in the past. They feel very, very actively poisonous in their own way.
And very stagnant, I
exactly.
think, as well. You're a really vocal intersectionalist and feminist online and in your own life, I imagine, especially with regard to film and film writing in that community. What's the most frustrating aspect for you in trying and how do you try to overcome it?
In film criticism or in film in general? Well, in film in general, I mean, that I wouldn't say that I'm qualified to speak to. I'm not involved in production. I'm not involved in how things get made or how things get financed, I suppose, is really where the problem is. But, diversity quotas have worked in other countries, and I don't know, it's a difficult, multifaceted issue. And yeah, it's a difficult issue when coming just to inspiration of, getting somebody from the stage of loving movies to being able to make movies. That's not just a difficult process in terms of funding, but in developing people's voices, it's difficult. In film criticism, there are so many, vibrant, exciting voices online. And I mean, I think the way that I very much fell into writing is a testament, I think, to how much there is out there. And as grateful as I am to the people who have taken a chance on me, you hope that there are more people out there who are not necessarily the same kind of person who gets, picked up. Somebody who's young and white, and that's the general climate, and that's okay. That's not, there are lots of writers I like who are, young and white and male and all those things that it's easy to box people into. But yeah, you do hope that those who are able to give people a chance are looking beyond what's most visible.
You prefer not to use labels to describe yourself as far as race or orientation or sexuality.
True.
Would you mind explaining that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that labels are labels, they're something that's external that is used to kind of categorize and make things easier for other people to see you and understand you, and that's great. But when it comes to yourself, I think it's important to know yourself for the individual that you are, and not for what box you should be fitting into. So I try not to limit myself to anything. And in some senses, especially with race, I'm mixed race. My mom is Puerto Rican and my dad is white. And there's a sense of in-betweenness that's very active, and that it doesn't necessarily feel right to claim claim a sense of being a person of color, because I experience white privilege, and there are so many different charged ways that colorism and things like that can affect our own experiences. And it's true that my experience isn't my mom's experience, isn't my cousin's experience, isn't my aunt's experience. And so I think it's important to honor that too, and I try to do that as much as possible.
So, with that knowledge in mind, how does that impact how you view films and what you bring to them?
What I bring to them, well, I mean,
take from them rather.
Yeah, I mean, I think as in anything, you can't have, you take yourself to a movie, and the way I see the world is shaped by the life that I've lived and the life that, is ahead of me. And we're all from our own position. And so I guess that what I take into films is myself, and whatever that means.
And how do you feel or think about how the Oscars were reflective or not reflective of race and gender and sexuality this year?
Well, the Oscars are reflective of the industry, first and foremost. I think it's an industry that is remarkably undiverse for the time and era and moment that we're living in, even in terms of culture. I mean, you look to the Grammys, and the Grammys have their own issues with diversity and what gets nominated and where, but at least there is some kind of visibility of Black artists or artists of color or other orientations that the film industry, I think partly because any given venture in film is so expensive, and because of that, there's so much more risk going into every given venture that they aren't willing to try these, not new voices, because these voices have been around as long as any others, but they're not willing to try anything different from what the status quo has been. And so the Oscars are reflective of that. I do think that some of the, there have been a lot of complaints about Selma, and I loved Selma. I think that's a beautiful film, and I think on its artistic merits, it is ludicrous that wasn't nominated for the Oscars, and it is hard to imagine that the political message of that film, that the filmmakers, overt nods to where we are as a nation, that those kind of social and racial and political implications weren't part of why the film was ignored by part of the Oscar voters. But I think it's a mistake to say that Selma not getting nominated for the Oscars is the problem. The problem is that there aren't more Black films or films by people of color in production at any given moment by major studios, and that aren't being pushed by major studios, that aren't being they don't have the ad campaigns, they don't have the what's the word I'm looking for,
budget.
The budget. Well, the budget, but the distribution, exhibition.
The distribution power.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it is frustrating to see a movie that is so successful on all of the kind of measurable levels that you tend to think of these Oscar prestige movies operating on. And in every way, Selma seems to be accomplishing that. And so it's frustrating to see them ignore it, but at the same time, it's equally frustrating to see there be one token film any given year, or one token performance, or, Denzel Washington gets a nomination again, and there's not substantive support for Black filmmaking as a movement. Or Latino-Latina filmmaking. I mean, it's not like, my family's being represented either, or Asian families, or queer films. These aren't what the industry is putting its money behind, despite the fact that it is a part of culture.
When you mentioned queer, that's very interesting, because I just saw The Imitation Game.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What is up with The Imitation Game? Wow. How, like, what are people seeing in that movie that I am not seeing?
I don't know. I mean, I thought it was a fine kind of conventional biopic that wasn't unentertaining, but a lot of the conversation was focused around Turing's sexuality and how quote-unquote accurate it was to his personal life. And I was like, that to me isn't as interesting in as much as the Human Rights Campaign backing the film so strongly.
Yeah.
Which was very confusing to me because I've never seen them do that before, and I'm wondering why haven't they done that with smaller independent features that are, I think, just as important in terms of raising awareness of queer visibility. I wanted to think about the film as what place it had as a queer film, and I feel like it's the kind of film that really, really wants to qualify, because I was thinking, what constitutes a queer film? Does The Imitation Game count? Why or why not? And
does The Imitation Game want to be a queer film, or does it want to be a gay film? Because I think there is a difference, and
that's interesting.
I definitely don't think that. I don't think Imitation Game is queer, even if it is, and I think overtly gay.
Because you hear him say it 3 times.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's part of why it's gotten the support of the Human Rights Campaign. I think that's part of why it's being shown in theaters that wouldn't necessarily show a film that has a more overtly outsider perspective. I don't think that Imitation Game is at all invested in a sense of I don't know, like anti-authority or any of those things that are outside of the status quo. It's very invested in integration and, integrating this man's story into the proper place of great man history. And that to me feels like a very calculated part of where we are in terms of queer rights and gay rights, and how our culture is and is not accepting aspects of gay life. Yeah, so I do think it's very of the moment, but not necessarily in the most flattering way.
I completely agree with you, because I think the biggest thing that's missing from The Imitation Game is that actual perspective and experience of otherness.
Yeah, of otherness. Otherness is a great word for it. You're right. There's that moment late in the movie where he's talking to the police officer, and it's, am I a man or am I a machine? And it's like, no, you're a man. Like, you're a man. I don't think that, I don't know. I just don't know what's the point of structuring a film around this such a basic idea. I don't know. It just in so many ways felt like it left the topic unexplored, left the art form unexplored. What was that movie bringing to cinema that was unique? And that's important. That's important too. Using the medium. I mean, one of the things that's frustrating to me about the Oscars in general is this kind of, it's supposed to be a celebration, or it claims to be a celebration of what is best in a year in terms of the art form, but the films themselves that are chosen and the reasons they're chosen and the way that they're promoted and the way that, you have your Harvey Weinstein ads all in the New York Times. It's like a content delivery service of the most quality content of all of the things that are the most respectable and the most worthwhile for your time, regardless of what form they take. And that's really frustrating.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with you. That is very frustrating, and I wish that, even though it's impossible, that we'd be able to expand the palette of the Academy.
Yeah, it's difficult, and it's difficult for a whole lot of reasons.
I saw your reaction to the brutally honest Oscar voter.
Oh my God, that's so embarrassing. That really though, what did the Hollywood Reporter do? Did they put out a casting call searching for the worst Oscar voter? If you believe that you're the worst one, please call the Hollywood Reporter. They love doing it, it's great. That's classic clickbait. It gets me every time, but this one was especially bad. What is it? There's no art in Selma. Those shit-stirrer filmmakers wearing their Black Lives Matter shirts. Come on. And it's a little frustrating to have, I don't know, such a major publication dip so low. But I guess that's what's there. Jeez.
So you also live in Connecticut, like myself.
Oh, Connecticut.
I know.
I gotta tell you, I'm ready to leave Connecticut.
Girl, you are talking to someone who's spent his whole life in Connecticut.
It wouldn't be so bad. It's not so bad when it's not so cold out. But this has been a brutal winter. This is the worst winter I've had in Connecticut by far.
My emaciated body cannot handle these winters. But, so you also live in Connecticut. And how do you deal with the fact that Connecticut doesn't get a lot of the films that are often being talked about within the online film community and within the film world, unless it's months late? Because West Hartford got 2 days, 1 night, 6 months after its run.
Yeah. Well, before I lived in Connecticut, I lived in Pennsylvania, and that was just as difficult, So I do what I always do, and I just wait. I wait, and I'll watch my showtimes, and I'll see what's coming. Connecticut, sometimes over the summer more so than now. It's difficult when school's going on. But over the summer, I would travel into the city for things I needed to see or wanted to see. But yeah, mobility is its own challenge, that's for sure. It is difficult, just with the modes of distribution that we have now and the way that things open, only in certain places. It is difficult to be a cinephile outside of New York, outside of these kind of urban hubs. So I sympathize with your Connecticut life because I lived it in Pennsylvania before I got here.
Mm-hmm. At least there's the bus or the train to New York.
That's true. Yeah, definitely. Actually, in a lot of ways, better than where I was before.
One of the conversations we've had in the past is this idea of authorship within film.
Ooh, I love thinking about this.
We talked specifically about Lars von Trier and the kind of duality of his films, specifically Breaking the Waves, Dancer in the Dark, and Dogville.
Yes.
His actresses had so much say in them. Would you mind elaborating on that?
Yeah, that's maybe my favorite thing to think about when it comes to movies. I was honestly on my way back from class thinking about, what do I hope I'm going to talk about with Kyle? I was hoping that this would come up. I think film is a complicated medium. And when we write about film, it's so easy to just think of it as a final product, as this thing that arrives ahead of us that's the clear vision of one person. And, tourism is such a popular and such a helpful way of thinking about films in so many ways. But Lars von Trier is a great example of someone who you can feel the tension between the different collaborators, especially between him and his actors, or in his case, actresses. Dancer in the Dark is one of my all-time favorite movies because you can feel his misery and her hope, and the way that those things interact on screen is so compelling and so beautiful. And so I think such a generous way of making movies, which is so funny for somebody who's as trolly as Lars von Trier, but he's a generous filmmaker in that way. He lets other people's visions come through. So I love that idea. I love when that happens in films. I love the magic of both seeing someone and having them look back.
That's a really beautiful way to put it. I was particularly interested and a little gobsmacked when I was watching Dogville Confessions, which is one of my favorite movies because you get to see Paul Bettany cry. It's amazing. It's like every time I watch Dogville, I just light up because I'm thinking in my head, Paul Bettany is crying somewhere.
That's a great one. Good movie criers. I love Juliette Binoche crying. I love Nicole Kidman crying because she really feels it, you know? I love people who, when they cry, I'm, like, really worried about them. That's a good feeling for me.
Lars von Trier made Paul Bettany cry on set, which is the best thing. But there was an argument that he was having with Nicole Kidman about the trajectory of her character, because she was supposed to sleep with Paul Bettany's character, but she was vehemently against that idea because it went against her entire character's morality, I guess.
Right.
So I think it very much ended up shaping how I thought about that film.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think about, Dancer in the Dark with Bjork, and all of their famous fights on set of, like, she would spit at him and he'd be screaming at her, and Catherine Deneuve is sitting in a corner like, these bitches be crazy, like, I can't even handle this. Or, I've just the other day, a friend of mine made me watch, I had never seen it before, and it's like running through my mind at all times now. Lily Tomlin freaking out on I Heart Huckabees. And it is a frictive, is that a word? There's a lot of friction in this medium. There's tension between the way that different artists interact, and that's great. That's awesome. I wish that there were more ways in film criticism to acknowledge all of the different voices that go into making a film. Not just actors and directors either. Selma is a good example of a film where the cinematographer feels as vital to the film as any other piece. But I think of Eiko Ishioka and all of the costumes that she made on Bram Stoker's Dracula. What would these films look like without the contributions of these very specific artists?
So we are almost out of time, but I'd like to ask
you
one more question.
One more question, okay.
Mm-hmm. Hypothetically, you end up dying a really cinematic death, and they
Oh, great, okay.
Yeah. They end up wanting to do a retrospective of your work and the things that you love. What films would you want to show at your funeral?
I would want all Isabelle Adjani movies, one after the other, and I would want no one to be allowed to leave the room. So I would want everyone to have to watch all of them all at once and then slowly go crazy and maybe kill each other. I don't really care what they do, but I want everyone to experience the descent.
That is the single best answer I've gotten from this question.
Great. No, that's good. I love her. She's my role model, or maybe that's the wrong word for somebody who's so disturbed, but I love her.
Didn't you go as her for Halloween?
I went as her for Halloween. That was my best ever Halloween costume. I went to the Goodwill and they just happened to have Possession, a Johnny Blue dress. It was perfect.
Thank you so much for coming on here, Teo. It was fantastic to have you.
No, it's great to be here, and it's nice. You won't be able to tell listening, but this is my first time meeting Kyle face to face. It's been beautiful.
It has. We need to really rectify that and get one.
Yeah, no, definitely. Especially since we're both in Connecticut.
And we're only like a half hour away from each other.
I know, but there's no transport. No. Like, there's like straight up, there's no public transportation in Connecticut. If you ever think you're gonna move to Connecticut, please have a car. Just throwing it out there for all readers. Please
don't. So where can people find you on the internet?
Where can they find me? I'm on Twitter, at TMI Bugbee. And that's pretty much it. I have a Facebook, but I don't really use it much. But I love Twitter. Please follow me on Twitter. I'd love to talk to anybody who'd like to chat.
Woo! Okay, and I'm Kyle Turner. You can find me at TYLEKURNER because I'm really creative. I run Movie Mezzanine's blog, The Balcony. You can find my collected writings on tylekerner.tumblr.com because sometimes I write around on the internet. And this is The Balcony's Film Critic of the Week. Thanks for listening, and keep on watching.